This podcast is brought to you by CMX CVS Media Exchange, celebrating 5 years of real shopper insights driving real brand wins. For 5 years, CMX has built personalized one-to-one interactions between brands and over 90 million addressable Extra Care members based on real customer behavior. With CMX, performance isn't just about impressions, it's about impact, ensuring that every campaign delivers on brand goals. Unlock your brand's next opportunity at cvsmediaexchange.com. CMX. It's not guessing, it's data.
Hello, Marketer's Brief listeners. I'm Parker Herron, host of Ad Age's new podcast, Ad Age Insider. And today, you're getting a little preview. Ad Age Insider is a weekly news show that will break down the industry's biggest stories so that you're always on top of the latest trends. If you like what you hear, please go subscribe to Ad Age Insider on your favorite podcast platform. Today is August 20th. This week, we're checking in on the trends defining ad creative this year, plus the numbers on how AI search is impacting brands, and behind the latest celebrity brand partnership drama. So let's get into it. Summer is a perfect time to reflect back on the work we've seen this year, and 2025 so far has produced some real showstoppers. Sweepingly cinematic spots like the caveman running through mountains and forests for craft sportswear. Immersive brand moments like Apple TV's Severance pop-up in Grand Central Station. And of course, plenty of bizarre and wacky stunts. This work has also revealed some of the key themes and questions swirling around the industry this year. The impact of AI on creativity, why experiential activations are taking over, and whether or not the Super Bowl is still a standout moment for brands. That's why I called up Tim Nudd, Ad Age's creativity editor, to help me break down those ideas, as well as get the scoop on his favorite ad from the year so far. Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Parker. Good to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to dig in a little with you. Earlier this week, as mentioned at the top of this episode, you published a roundup of the best ads of 2025 so far. And it is an incredibly impressive feat considering the deluge of work that you are digging through on a daily basis. So I, of course, want to rip apart that list and dig in with you. But first, I'd love a little peek behind the curtain on how you even approach digging through, whittling that down to just what? We have 28 ads on this list.
28 ads out of however many tens of thousands. Not that I watch every ad that's made in the country every year, disclaimer, but I do try to, balance out formats and things and tones and geography where we can. I don't think it's much more complicated than it just grabs me in some way. It's got to be engaging in some way. That could be any sort of format, or it can be any sort of emotion. Film obviously is an easy one to review. It's quite easy to watch a film and feel a reaction or not have a reaction. With the advent of AI, we're obviously looking more at how that is affecting film and marketing in general. I've always loved out of home. I've always loved experiential. Interesting digital things are happening all the time. So, the challenge for us really every morning is to try to look at as much work as we can, in a few hour period, try to get the day's kind of top campaigns published in the roundup. And then, by the end of the week, typically we will have covered 60, 70, 80 campaigns, either in brief or full stories. So that's a lot of work. And by mid-August, we've got tons and tons of work to go back through. And it was kind of fun to go back and look at all the roundups, look at all the stories we'd done. Pretty proud of the list. I think it's a fun one.
Yeah, definitely. There's a great diversity of things in there, as you were mentioning. And I think some of what you said is a perfect segue into breaking down some of the themes of that list. I think the most obvious spot to start, as you mentioned, is AI. That's not only a huge buzzy topic across all sectors of the advertising industry, but it is something that has huge consumer implications, and brands are commenting on it in some of the ads that we're seeing. I wanted to know in your list, there are kind of two approaches that I was seeing kind of stand out. We have two technology companies, Google and Pika, promoting their AI products in kind of different approaches to video ads. And then Polaroid and the Columbia Journalism Review have campaigns in there that you've noted, which take a more critical stance. So, what are you seeing in the way that brands are commenting on AI through their creative so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, from the advent of AI, I think AI has been almost like a topic of ads versus being an enabler of the creative process. And I think that is sort of changing. I do find it interesting that the Google spot that you mentioned, which was a Super Bowl commercial, that took a very sort of traditional storytelling approach. It was very heartfelt. It was very Google, very Super Bowl. And then the Pika spot is completely outlandish and crazy. So as far as tones, I feel like that's sort of fascinating. And then again, the Polaroid campaign was lovely as well. It was sort of an out of home series of out of home ads with Polaroid snapshots and, very brief headlines talking about how, the real world is so much more meaningful than the virtual world. And so, yeah, I think marketers are addressing AI in all sorts of ways, talking about AI in a lot of different ways. I don't know if AI as a content production tool has fully made its way in. I think last winter's Coca-Cola holiday campaign was a big example, but we haven't seen a ton. AI is still, to a degree, I think, a novelty. But then the PSAI that you mentioned, the Columbia Journalism Review, that was also a pretty fascinating piece too, because that was sort of about how to protect yourself from fake images online. So again, I think some of these campaigns really are talking about AI versus being powered by AI, if that makes sense. I think, I was expecting this year to maybe things move a little quicker than they have, but I think marketers are still sort of working through the legal, ethical, and sort of even procedural kind of ramifications of how to harness this tech properly. But I was glad that we got sort of four different campaigns on here that addressed it in some way.
I also think what's really crazy is the roller coaster that Google has been on with their AI ads. You may remember last year in the Olympics, they got into a bit of hot water for their ad depicting AI services helping a dad and daughter write a note to a favorite athlete, if I'm remembering correctly. And this time they have the prestigious honor of being on Ad Age's top ads of 2025 so far. What do you think about that spot this time around resonated a little more than the last one?
Well, I think they learned their lesson from the first one, which is that there is a certain amount of built in resistance to AI among consumers at large. And that earlier spot that you mentioned from the Olympics, where I think it was a girl writing a letter to an athlete, and the idea that a child should use AI to sort of find her feelings or be able to express her feelings, I think was met with a ton of resistance, honestly. And so what they did for the Super Bowl commercial was really, I think, take a step back and create a human story first that had AI kind of in a supporting role. AI is not like a prime mover in the plot of that Super Bowl ad. I think it's about a father who is interviewing for a job, and he's asked sort of what experiences in his life have been most meaningful. And it turns out that he's sort of talking about this relationship with his daughter. So it's very classic emotive advertising.
And I should note that in addition to the best ads of the year so far, I'll have in the show notes a study guide, a crash course in all the things we're talking about. So if you're wondering, oh, what was that Olympics Google ad they're talking about? You can look at this episode show notes and we'll have a link for you there. Outside of AI, Tim, I'm wondering what other themes are you seeing resonating across creative advertising so far this year?
Well, so this is related actually, which is I think it's been a strong year for experiential so far. I think people are a little bit tired of digital experience, digital life, digital worlds. And so we saw several campaigns this year that I really liked and included on this list that had kind of real world interactions between a brand and the consumer. One of the most prominent was the Apple TV Plus stunt in Grand Central, where they got the cast of Severance to come and sort of act out their Severance characters inside this glass box. I thought that was a really wonderfully simple campaign, conceptually pretty clever too, since you're capturing people on their commute, which is between their home life and their work life, which is very much the theme of the show. Microsoft, again, another big tech company, doing their own experiential build at the Build conference, where they worked with assembly and missing pieces to create this 1970s themed workspace where visitors to the conference could go and experience what the early developers at Microsoft, the kind of environment they worked in. So both of those, I think it's interesting. Apple and Microsoft, these are some of the biggest tech companies in the world embracing, real experiences. And they've done that. And we talked about Google. Google's done this from the beginning, really. They create tactile things in their marketing oftentimes to make people feel like they exist, because otherwise most of their products are invisible to a degree. So I thought that was interesting. And then another example of great experiential this year was Warner Music Group. They did a campaign for the Talking Heads for the 50th anniversary of the band's first performance. The experiential agency Dayan did a really cool campaign in the Bowery in New York, hyper local, but touching all sorts of different media. Basically, all the creative was based around the lyrical hook from Psycho Killer, the fa 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 fa. And yeah,
Wait, what was that? What was that?
Fa 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 fa. And it was such a cool campaign, and it had so many different touch points. And there was also a new Psycho Killer music video that Mike Mills directed, Mike Mills being one of the great commercial directors of the past 20 years. So I think experiential has been strong. And then the other theme I would say is just playfulness.
I feel like these are things we've been hearing about initially as like a response to the pandemic. I had heard a ton when I started at Ad Age. I was actually working on the creativity team, and people would say to me like, oh, it's going to be all about experiential to get people out of the house and doing more things as that became possible. I'm wondering, is that still a kind of prolonged effect of that sensation, or is there something different happening right now that is leading so many brands to prioritize experiential?
I think it is new. I don't think it's necessarily a continuation of what happened during COVID. I think that brands are coming to realize that they can have kind of an outsized impact when they really narrow their target and present something to people in their real lives. I mean, there's nothing wrong, of course, with mass media. Mass media is very effective. Storytelling in traditional channels, film, TV, all that stuff is still very effective in some ways. But I think that there is value. I think more brands than ever are finding value in these sort of real targeted, real world experiences. And I think creatively, listen, it's difficult sometimes to share what those experiences are, because it's almost like you have to be there kind of situation. But the brands that are, first of all, doing those experiences and then able to sort of scale them in some way, whether that's interesting visuals that play well on their own online, or case studies or films that sort of capture the experience, I do think there's immense power in affecting people in the moment where they are in their physical lives. The challenge, I think, for most brands is it worth the money? Can we do that and still have scale? And I think, agencies like Dayan that I mentioned, they're attracting more traditional ad creatives who can then maybe bring more of a concept or more of an idea to these activations that I think can expand their scale. So I think it's a really exciting time for experiential, and I think it is gaining momentum not related to COVID.
Coming up, what makes a standout Super Bowl campaign, and Tim's favorite ad of 2025 so far. That's next on Ad Age Insider.
This podcast is brought to you by CMX CVS Media Exchange. CMX enables brands to engage with high-intent shoppers across the full path to purchase, from digital inspiration to in-aisle activation. With 2 billion on-site impressions, nearly 2,000 digital screens in-store, and the ability to reach shoppers through first-to-market collaborations with industry-leading publishers and networks, CMX is leading the next chapter in retail media. Discover more at cvsmediaexchange.com. CMX. It's not guessing, it's data.
The other topic I wanted to hit on with you is the Super Bowl. Your list has 5 Super Bowl spots among the best of the year. And it's interesting. I feel like maybe this is just me and my circle. Immediately following this year's Super Bowl, I felt a little bit of dissatisfaction with the creativity in the Super Bowl this year. Maybe people love to complain, but it
Always.
seems, yes, it seems that some of these have stuck with us throughout the year. So I didn't know if maybe you had a thought on the state of the Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, so actually, it's 5.5 Super Bowl campaigns on here because the State Farm Batman versus Bateman, that was supposed to be a Super Bowl commercial, but they pushed the production of that off because of the LA wildfires. So, but that is pretty standard Super Bowl fare as well. Yeah, listen, I think what's interesting about some of these is I think they go beyond what the Super Bowl spot itself was. So, a good example, I think, is Coors Light. They had lots and lots of content in the 2, 3, 4 weeks before the game. The theme of their campaign was Case of the Mondays. So every Monday for a couple of weeks leading up, they had pretty fun content. And this was a mischief campaign. One of them being a typo on a Times Square billboard, which people passed around as though it were real. It was, of course, turned out to be pre-planned. I think it was refreshment instead of refreshment. And then they had, I think, some Timothy Simons appeared in a couple of teasers, and they had a funny product rollout, as I recall. So it wasn't just about the Super Bowl. And I think what the previous year's game, I think Sarah V taught people a lot, which was, the spot itself only has to be part of it. If you build a real, and not just, I'm not just talking about pre-releasing the ad 3 days ahead, having a real robust content strategy going back, weeks or even months in some cases. The GoDaddy campaign with Walton Goggins is a good example of a content campaign that started, I think, 6 months before. GoDaddy basically helped Walton Goggins create this weird eyewear brand. And when the eyewear brand was announced, which was, I think, in September, October the previous year, no one knew it was a GoDaddy thing. No one knew it was a Super Bowl thing. So it got its own sort of media ahead of time. And then only later did the Super Bowl piece of it become apparent. And Quality Meats developed that campaign with the in-house team at GoDaddy, and it won a Grand Prix at Cannes. So I think what's interesting about Super Bowl work is I think for so many years, people have just thought, oh, is it a great 30 or is it a great 60? I think now it's like, well, what does the architecture of the larger campaign look like? And can we extend this either before, after? I think there's lots of different ways that brands are doing that. And then the Super Bowl, what I love about Super Bowl two is that that 100 million people are going to watch this. So it's not a campaign, that sometimes I get campaigns pitched to me and it's like, well, who actually saw this? Like, yes, it's a creative idea, but did it run, at 3 a.m. in like Idaho or whatever? And so what's wonderful about Super Bowl is it's a huge mass experience. So anything that's put on the game, it has to live up to the expectations of 100 million people. So I think the Google spot that we already mentioned, I think the Mountain Dew Seal commercial was really fun. The Nike spot, So Win, which was Nike's first Super Bowl ad in 27 years, I thought that was super strong. So, I mean, maybe, listen, if folks didn't like the Super Bowl creative, maybe that's just because people are used to the unfortunate middle of Super Bowl commercials, which is the 20 or 30 spots that follow a very specific formula, which is getting pretty tired. But I think the top tier of Super Bowl commercials is as good as it's ever been. And it's becoming even more interesting based on, the way that the campaigns expand into culture beyond the moment it has on the game.
I love that take. And also, Walton Goggins, is he the celebrity brand fascination of the year?
He must be. Yeah, he just came out with well, he was in a Walmart commercial, first of all, which is bizarre. And then he just was in this Doritos thing, this sort of 4-minute adult entertainment parody. And yeah, everyone loves him. I guess White Lotus made him a star. I mean, he's been around forever. Righteous Gemstones is a favorite of mine, but yeah, he's a fun guy to have around in the commercial space.
Yes. Well, Tim, to cap us off, I was wondering if it would not be too taboo of a question to ask which your favorite of the list is this year. Not necessarily the best
Lord.
ad, but the Tim pick of go look at this ad ASAP.
This is going to pigeonhole me for when we come to December and I have to rank these things. But one spot that I really, really liked was the Forsman and Bodenfors ad for Kraft Sportswear, which is the caveman. spot, which is it's an actual elite runner. I forget his name, but he's in prosthetics to look like a caveman, and he runs through the wilderness and into a city. And I just love the way it was made. I've watched it like probably 10 times. And, the insight, which is we're human beings, we've been running forever, is such a simple one. And when we were hunter gatherers, I'm sure we were running around the landscape. I just love the simpleness of that. I love the filmmaking. I love the end of it where he ends up in a modern day coffee shop, and there's a moment where another caveman runs behind. You can almost miss it. Like, the craft of it is so great. And when I first saw it, I probably overly gushed about it in the story that I wrote, but I'm sticking to it. I think even with the caveman heavy advertising content that we get, the Geico stuff, I think this one is fantastic. It stands out. Absolutely one of my favorites of the year.
I think I'm the sole justice for the dancing tongue person on this earth. I don't think anyone liked that ad but me.
Polarizing.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me. This was a blast.
Great. Thanks for having me, Parker.
This week's account reviews to know. MasterCard has hired WPP Media to lead media strategy, planning, and buying. MasterCard had previously worked with Dentsu. It's WPP Media's first major global win since rebranding from Group M this summer. In a statement, MasterCard said that it chose WPP Media for its AI and data capabilities. It will remain working with IPG's McCann as its creative agency of record, a partnership that is decades old. And TJX, the parent of chains like TJ Maxx, has selected new creative agencies of record for its brands HomeGoods and Sierra Trading Post. Publicis Group's Fallon will lead creative for HomeGoods, while Barclay OKRP won Sierra Trading Post. TJX is still seeking a global media agency of record for its full brand portfolio. WPP Media's Mindshare had handled media for TJX since 2017. Now, a few more headlines to know this week. At this point, you may be getting used to Google AI answering your search question in that little box that appears before the traditional list of links. Because of that, and similar offerings from platforms like Perplexity and ChatGPT, the effectiveness of brand search strategies has been an ongoing question. However, some brands are actually seeing a rise in site visits. Ad Age worked with data intelligence firms SimilarWeb and SEMrush to quantify what's going on here. One chart shows that from July 2024 to July 2025, desktop and mobile traffic to lifestyle brand websites actually rose 12.2%. Similarly, lifts occurred for food and beverage brands, as well as hotels. E-commerce remained flat, but traffic to consumer electronics sites declined 3.6%. The most dramatically impacted? Traffic to news and media websites dropped nearly 20%. Follow the link in this episode's show notes to see this data and more. Also, consumer scrutiny on celebrity brand partnerships continue. While American Eagle's work with actress Sydney Sweeney was recently in the hot seat, now e.l.f. Cosmetics is getting pushed back. In a recent social campaign, e.l.f. Cosmetics featured controversial comedian Matt Rife, who has previously drawn criticism for his jokes about domestic violence. e.l.f.'s global CMO, Corey Marchesotto, told Business of Fashion that Rife's social following, primarily women under 34, overlapped with e.l.f.'s targets for the campaign. e.l.f. has since apologized for the partnership, but has yet to remove the social posts associated with Rife as of this recording. According to experts interviewed by Ad Age, the turnaround for social brand campaigns like this has tightened from 3 months to about 1, and straight data often takes priority over more thorough cultural vetting on short turns. Dig deeper via the link in this episode's description. Finally, Ad Age is launching its first members-only community. Members of the small agency network get exclusive benefits, including in-person meetups and workshops, curated newsletters, a private WhatsApp group, and a complimentary subscription to Ad Age's All Access tier. The link to apply for the small agency network will be in this episode's show notes, along with further reading on each story I've mentioned. If you enjoyed Ad Age Insider, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Have a topic you want me to dig into? email your ideas to aapodcast@adage.com or DM me on LinkedIn. Thank you to my guest, creativity editor Tim Nudd, and to producer Lauren Ciardio. Thanks to you for listening. I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Enjoy your week.